Hey, what is up guys? This is Daksh here from Daksh Creative, and today we're going to be taking a look at an exciting tutorial where we're going to be looking at how to provide more emphasis to your subject in a photograph. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is by separating the foreground and the background element and creating what is called a bokeh, or a shallow depth of field. Now immediately this is going to add a lot of depth to your image as long as you have a foreground, a clearly defined background. Right, so you don't necessarily need a picture taken off a high-end DSLR to try this off. Even a regular cell phone camera image will suffice, provided it is of a good resolution and has sharpness to it. Okay, so we've got a lot of ground to cover, so without further delay, let's jump right in and get Alright, so right off the bat, this is the picture that we're going to be using. It's a picture of my lovely friend Namita Vankawala. Special thanks to her for sharing this with me. Like I said, you don't need a high-end DSLR or a really expensive gadget to click pictures and edit them. A regular cell phone camera image would perfectly suffice. In fact, this particular picture was taken using a Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do here with the picture is that if you look at around her, you can see that it's kind of dark, right? So we need to brighten up the image a little bit only on her, because you can also see that there are some really exposed points here in the image as well. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to change the blending mode to screen. You can see that it kind of blew up the entire image here, and I'm going to select, with my layer mask selected, I'm going to flood the image with black, and then use my brush tool. So the keyboard shortcut is B. I'm going to use my brush tool, and let me adjust the brush size here. A good tip to adjust the brush size is to hold your Control and Alt key together and right mouse click. So sliding the brush left and right will adjust the size. Sliding the mouse up and down will adjust the softness of your brush. Okay, so I'm going to kind of increase the brush size. So if you're using Mac, it's going to be Option and Command click. Okay, so I'm just going to paint white around her face, a little bit around her legs, maybe the handbag a little bit. It definitely need not have to be perfect, but just so that she looks a little brighter. Okay, like so. A little bit around the hair. Okay, so now with that done, you can see the difference here. So that's the original image, and this is after brightening the image. Okay, it need not be absolutely perfect. This is perfectly fine, because post-editing, nobody's gonna really go in, zoom in and check if the edges are perfectly clear. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is, when you're adding something like a blur effect, you're gonna want to remove the foreground from the background. In this case, I'm going to be using the pen tool to extract Namita out of the background and put her onto a new layer so that I can comfortably work with the foreground. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to duplicate my background layer. This can be done one of two ways. Either you drag the layer and drop it here in the new layer menu to create a copy, or you can just select the layer and hit Ctrl J. So when you hit Ctrl J, it's going to duplicate a layer for you. Okay, now with the duplicate layer selected, I'm going to use my pen tool. Right, so keyboard shortcut P. I'm going to use my pen tool to draw out a layer mask. So I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to start off from about here. You can see that the image is not all that high res. It's kind of pretty low res, but that's the whole point. You don't need to have a high res image. And for the benefit of the viewers, I am going to be speeding up the video so that you guys don't have to wait for the entire clip. Okay, so once the layer mask is selected, I'm going to right click anywhere on the layer and say make selection. Now, and I'm going to say, I'm going to kind of feather the radius to about 1.5 pixels, and I'm going to say okay. Now this way you're not going to have any completely rigid rough edges. Now, now that this is done, I'm going to go ahead and click on the layer mask option, and you can see that she's now cut from the background. Okay, now with the layer mask selected, I'm gonna go ahead and work on these gaps here. Okay, so again I'm gonna make use of the pen tool. So I'm gonna click here like so. So I'm kind of doing a rough job right now with respect to this selection. However, if you wish to, you can always take some time out and do this. Again, make selection, okay, and I'm gonna fill this up with black. That way it makes the layer transparent. Okay, again, here we need some work. So you can see that it's kind of fringing right there because of the resolution of the image, but that's perfectly fine. So I'm gonna again go in pen tool, make a selection. Like I said, nobody's really going to be make more selections. Nobody's really going to be zooming in at this level to see, hey, you know what, is this selected properly? Okay, so I'm going to say make selection again and fill with black. There you go. Great. Now with our foreground separated from the background, we can go ahead and add our motion blur, or in this case I'm going to be using a blur type called tilt shift to work on the image. Okay, now let's go ahead, unhide the background, so that you hide or unhide the background by selecting this little eye icon, which is basically to do with your layer visibility. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and hide this layer on top. However, I'm gonna control click on the layer mask to make this selection. Okay, so I'm gonna control click on the layer mask to ensure that the selection is selected. Okay, I'm gonna select my background layer. Now this is an important step, it can be a little confusing. Okay, and I'm gonna go into select, modify, and expand. And let's say I'm expanding the selection by about 5 pixels. I'm okay with 5 pixels. Okay, perfect. Okay, now the next thing that we have to do is to separate, or rather remove Namita from the background. Okay, and the best way to do this is by edit, fill, and in the full content section I'm gonna say content aware, and I'm gonna click on OK. Now we just have to give Photoshop a little bit of time depending on the resolution of your image. You can see that it kind of did a great job here with pretty small amount of time, but if you have a high resolution picture, then it's going to take longer. Okay, and you can deselect. Control D to deselect. Now you can see that we have a foreground, we have the background. You can see that it's kind of a little bit of a rough work here, but I think that's okay for now. We can always, the beauty of using the pen tool to create layer mask is that you can always go in and paint details back. So I'm just gonna go in, click on white, and I'm gonna paint like so. We'll have to fix the fit because shadows are very important, right? Just ensure that I'm just making a few tweaks here so that it doesn't look as obviously cut out. Might actually increase the hardness of my brush a bit. A little bit like so. You can always, whenever you're cutting out a subject from the background, it's always a little bit of back and forth there. Like I said, I'm doing a pretty rough job here, but you may resort to use the pen tool and make a much better work than what I did. Okay, Moving on. Now I'm going to select the background layer again. Okay. Now I'm going to make another copy of it. All right. And to this layer, I'm going to go into filter, blur, and I'm going to choose tilt shift. Okay. So right off the bat, you can see that Photoshop has given me this option. Now I'm going to put the focus point right where her leg is, like that. And this is basically, with this you can adjust how you want the blur to be, right? So I'm going to select the mid ground at somewhere around here, and then I'm going to choose the background way, push the background way further, like so. Okay, don't worry about this. I know there's a lot of artifacting. We can definitely go ahead and correct that. Not a problem at all, right? This is whatever you're learning right now is non-destructive workflow, so don't worry about it. Okay, so I might want to. You can go ahead and play around with the blur effect. You can also go ahead and play around with the distortion and whatever. So light bokeh. So that's something that I'm going to use. I'm going to create some light bokehs. Give it a little bit of bokeh color because I don't want it to be perfectly white. And we can also work on the range. This kind of creates that magical dot dot kind of effect. Okay, fantastic. A little bit of adjustment here. Probably might want the blur to start a little lower, like so. Maybe not so much of light bokeh or the bokeh color. So how much blur you want is really up to you, so you can really decide on how you would want this. Okay, great. Now once you like the results, once you are happy with the results you've achieved, you can now go ahead and click OK. Alright, that immediately renders the blur in. Now again, you can see that there's a lot of artifacting going on around here. We can definitely go ahead and fix that. Just select the layer mask, go to your brush tool, and just paint it black. Again, you might want to adjust your brush size depending on how accurately you want it. Or you can just make a selection and simply fill in to the layer mask. Okay, I also want to kind of just adjust that a bit. Okay, great. Looks better. Awesome. So that's it for the first part of the tutorial. Now I hope you guys liked what you just saw with respect to adding a lens blur or a bokeh effect to your photographs. Now the next portion of the tutorial is going to deal with adding a little bit of filtering to your images, something like what you find on Instagram. It's just that this is Photoshop and you have obviously a lot more control over it. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to go in and select all of these layers just to clean things up. I'm going to right click and say convert to smart object. Now the beauty of a smart object is I can always double click on a smart object and make changes to my layers in future, right? If I'm working with a client and if I'm going to have to send this to my client and say, hey, you know what, why don't you review this and tell me what you feel about this picture, then my client can say, hey, you know what, I don't like this, please make changes. You have the option of doing it in a smart object. You can't do that if you merge the entire layer. Okay, so now I'm going to add a curves adjustment to my layer, kind of work a little bit on the contrast, make a contrast curve right here. Okay, like so. And you can also use this tool when working with curves adjustment, where you can just go in, pick a color on the image and decide on whether you want it to be bright or you want it to be dark. So wherever you have that particular color in an image, the curves adjustment will automatically make the changes for you. I kind of like this. Okay, so I'm also going to go ahead and probably increase the blue channel a little bit, like this, and probably just the red channel a little bit, like so. Might want to just make a tiny bit adjustment here. Okay, right, and let me add a new layer to this. Use my brush tool. Now you can actually see how versatile blend modes are with this workflow actually. So I might just click on select a color here. Let me choose something like so. Something about orange. Just keep a few dots and hit Control T on the keyboard. Okay, and I'm just gonna expand this by holding Alt so that it's centered, and make a nice big image there. And I'm gonna go in and change the blend mode to say screen, or perhaps soft light. I think I like soft light. Okay, now I might also create another layer while I'm at that and choose a different color for this, something a little more contrasty, and let me do the same thing for this. Okay, perhaps no, I'm just gonna leave it at soft light. However, what I would want for this layer is to put this behind. I might in fact just cut this layer out from here. Sorry, just double click on my smart object. So this is exactly what I said, right? So I can just come in here, move this layer into this guy, right? Move him from here and bring him here. That way we can add some effect behind her, so it kind of looks a little different and mystical, right? So it doesn't look too flat, you know, it doesn't look, so adding a little bit of three-dimensional effect to it. Okay, and I might delete this guy here, right? So when I close my smart object, it's going to ask you if you want to save it. You click yes, and the results are going to render right here, which is great. Okay, I might just create another layer for here and go over to my brush tool. Probably pick something a little more subtle, like that. And probably say overlay. So as you can see, you know, it's mostly experimenting, you know. So the more you experiment, every time you're going to be you're going to come up with something new, right? Each time you experiment. Now on top of all of this, I do see that there is a little bit of artifacting near her hair here, so I might again open my smart object, go into my layer mask, change the brush size like that, and make the adjustments. It's okay if the background color bleeds into the foreground a little bit, but the other way it's not going to look very good. Let's save. That's going to update right here. Okay, now to basically connect all of this, I'm going to go ahead, because you can see there's a lot of different lighting all over the place. I'm going to go ahead and add a black and white adjustment layer just to neutralize it. Might reduce the opacity a little bit, just a tad little, and I might add another curves adjustment layer like that. And probably bring the reds down a little. Okay. And finally, I might also create another curves adjustment and make it nice and dark this time around. Fill it with black, and I'm going to use my brush tool to paint areas which I want dark to create a effect of vignette around our image. Not so much, obviously. Just a tad little. Okay. And I can also reduce the opacity of this so that it's not so drastic. Okay, so that is it for this tutorial, guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, just one last step here. I'm gonna add my signature onto the photo. Whoa, that's huge. Reduce the brush size so much. Select a color somewhere from here, and bingo. And probably I'll use one of these blend modes here. Hard light. Or let me just I mean, most of this is really a matter of experimenting, because you don't really know which one's going to turn out really well. I kind of like this. Might just increase the size of this.